Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome back to Dead Malls, your one home for everything Dead Mall and retail related. In this Season 7 episode, we begin the final northern binge of malls in Minnesota and Wisconsin before we finally get to the southern expeditions. But that's just me getting ahead of myself. Tonight, we will be touring and telling the story of Wilmar, Minnesota's Uptown Willmar, or as locals might more commonly know it, the Kandi Mall, a charming little mirror-clad mall which reeked of the 1980s in the best ways possible, but has as of recent fallen on some hard times. With this summer footage, you'll especially be able to see several tenants which have since vacated the dead hallways. But before I spoil too much of this dead mall, I'd like to shout out our winner who was able to successfully guess it. Congratulations, Joe Raider. If you'd like to have your chance of being shouted out in the next episode, stick around for the next challenge. Anyways, let's drive around the back side of the mall here, see a bit of the empty anchor buildings, then head in, tell the story of, and see how Uptown Willmar was doing as of my visit in July of 2024. Between the occasional, sparsely dotted mall plant and the typical mall walker, those are about the only walks of life you're going to see in tonight's mall, as the rest of it is very dead, and not necessarily outdated in a bad way, but it very much feels like an old mall. Between the old terrazzo floors, the old walled-off and closed storefronts, those amazing mirrored ceilings, oh my gosh, giving me Mountaineer flashbacks. Anybody remember that mall? Our story first begins in the small but growing Minnesota town of Wilmar. Before Kandi Mall, Skylark Center, Wilmar's first official mall, more of a glorified hallway, opened its doors in 1965. And just years later, the town's second, much larger, and much more modern shopping mall would open just across the street. Groundbreaking in construction for the brand new 200,000 square foot Kandi Mall began in 1972. Constructed and headed by Orrin Erickson at a cost of $3 million, the site of the new mall quickly took shape. The new Kandi Mall, as it would be known, named after its residing home of Kandiyohi County, was set to officially open in 1973. In public anticipation, not just in town, but all of the surrounding areas would begin to build. We'll begin tonight's tour off by going down the mall's old JCPenney wing, which is easily the deadest, with a bunch of these old stores being walled off long ago. But this area especially, and this whole mall really, just reminds me of the old Crossroads Mall in Fort Dodge, Iowa. The ramps and the little lighting accents and the ceilings, there was just so much character in everything. I loved it so much. My cup of tea. This old JCPenney entry corridor and the old Kmart corridor, which you're going to see coming up, were just these extremely dark areas of the mall that are only sparsely lit by their small skylights above. But it leads to this mall just having so many long stretches of corridor where there's no stores, no lights, no people. I can see why there's nobody here. It just feels so creepy. This place isn't abandoned, not yet, but it's nowhere near alive either. Despite a bar and an indoor golf place taking over the former Herberger's home store, all of Kandi just feels like a place where time is stretched thin. From the muted beige colors of the 80s, the mirrored ceilings, and even the giant real plants which have seemingly outlived the place. It was designed for crowds, but now it just waits. The air feels too still, like the building itself forgot what it was for. The mall is not just empty, it's dreaming. On Thursday, August 16th, 1973, Hubert Humphrey himself was present as the Kandi Mall would officially open its doors for business. Anchored by a singular massive department store called Gold Finds, other tenants to open in the small mall included Snyder Drug, Bostwick's, Crown Floral, Hal's Sportswear, Kinney Shoes, Paffrath Jewelry, Maurice's, Dairy Freeze, an arcade, and the Golden Stack restaurant. An estimated 40,000 shoppers came to visit the mall within its first few weeks alone. It's safe to say that the Kandi Mall was a hit, as just months later on December 28, 1973, a new two-screen movie theater would open near Gold Finds called the Kandi Twin, with opening day films Bang the Drum and Bloom in Love. Originally operated by United General Theaters, it would be taken over by Midco Theaters a year later in 1974. By 75, amid financial troubles, Oren Erickson would sell the mall to Watson Centers. He would immediately begin talks of a new mall expansion and replacement for the now bankrupt Gold Finds, who would close in 1975. As early as September of 1976, talks began for the new mall expansion and a new anchor store, Minnesota-based Herberger's, which was all set to be constructed by 77. However, these plans would all stall until the mall's next owner came into the picture. In March of 1979, First Union Real Estate Investments would buy up Kandi, with new intent and plans to fully flesh out the space and more than double it. stay, shop, play, and our many closed spaces should be the new advertising they use for this place. Kohl's may have taken up the old Kmart building in the modern day, but that old facade, I just hope that they never change it, still holding on to those classic Kmart style brick stripes and punchy red and blue colors. You can almost feel the 80s baked into the walls here. Behind the closed double doors on the left, unbeknownst to me, lie the mall's original 4-screen movie theater. Makes you wonder what else is hiding behind all that drywall. This whole wing, dark as a back alley, feels forgotten. Aside from the dribble of mall walkers shuffling through. Opening on May 17, 1979, the old Goldfind space would finally find new life as Kmart would fully renovate and turn the space into their newest discount store. A year later in 1980, and construction would finally begin after years of talk on the mall's first major expansion, a 120,000 square foot addition which would add a brand new Herberger's anchor store. A year later in 1981, and Herberger's were officially the first ones to fully open in the mall's brand new expansion wing. On May 28, 1981, a third screen would open in the theaters, and they would officially be rebranded to the Kandi 123. Years later, on December 16, 1983, and this name was once more changed when a fourth screen was added, with the theaters from then on going by the moniker Kandi 4. In 1983, work began on Phase 2, as it was called, which would add a new 40,000 square foot addition to the east side, as well as the mall's third official anchor. JCPenney, as well as all of this new square footage, would open in 1984, bringing the mall up to its current look. And it's basically remained completely unchanged aesthetically since the 1980s. Let's take a moment to pour one out for Joanne, another lost comrade out here on the battlefield. This was an especially major store in this mall, so I do wonder. I would have to go back and see how it's doing, but I do wonder how this mall is doing without its massive Joanne store anymore. here we're going to make one of the coolest discoveries that I have ever found inside of a dead mall. That being an entirely functional radio station. Just chilling in the back here. Easily one of the coolest discoveries I've made in a dead mall. I can't say that I've ever seen a radio station inside of a mall. And it's neon wrapped? Oh, get out of here. Despite the additions to Kandi Mall, it was struggling by the mid-80s. A late 1983 directory shows that, despite the new anchors being open, their accompanying wings just weren't filling up, with several closed stores plaguing the halls even 40 years ago. If Kandi Mall were to have had a peak, it would have been in 1989, where about 85% of its spaces were eventually leased, the highest it would ever get. The first major loss, however, came when junior anchor Spurgeon's closed their doors in 1992. The loss of Spurgeon's was just the beginning, however, as with the start of the 90s, almost all of the tenants' 20-year leases came due, and several would choose to vacate the structure. Your camera's up there. Security must be Spider-Man. Kandi Mall just wasn't pulling in crowds like the bigger and better malls were. However, after the losses of further junior anchor names like Wallace's, Ben Franklin, and Sears, it was clear that something had to be done. In 1995, 5 more stores would close in the mall, including Fashion Bug. And while these losses were bad, thankfully a new use would come for all of these empty storefronts near the front entrance. In early 1995, theater owners Midco would begin construction on a new 6-screen movie theater called Midco 6, right at the mall's main entrance. Built on the former site of the mall's Spurgeon's and Ben Franklin store, the original Kandi 4 would show its final films, Bad Boys, A Goofy Movie, Jury Duty, and Tommy Boy, on April 24th, 1995, before closing forever. The next day, Midco had simply moved across the mall to the brand new theaters, and the old 4-screen has sat abandoned since, with most of it now covered up by drywall and not even visible anymore. Which begs the question, if those old movie posters are still back there and the whole place itself is like untouched from 1995. I don't know, maybe I'll make a trip back one day just to peer through those double doors, just so I can know for myself. There might be nothing left, but who knows until you actually go and see it for yourself. Sears would also make their return, opening a new larger store in the Herberger's wing in 1995, after they had closed their previously smaller store in the mall years prior. These new additions, however, were still overshadowed by tenant losses throughout the structure. In 1998, the thrifty white drugstore, whom had been a long-standing name, would too close. First Union, seeing the writing on the wall, would sell the mall to J. Herzog & Sons that same year of 1998 for $22 million. And over the years, the already stagnant mall has sort of stagnated into the modern day as a dead mall. Over the years, Kandi lost its dominance as other big box retailers and strip malls opened nearby. Like pretty much every other small town mall we've covered, it was a very similar fate to Kandi. In 2006, Dunham Sports would come to fill a void, opening in the former spot of Thrifty White, and things would remain steady as the mall slowly pushed through the late 2000s recession. 2012, however, was the next bad news, as Sears would downgrade their store to a hometown location, and Kmart, a pretty massive store on the mall's south side, would close its doors for good, being another massive weight to bring it all down. In 2015, mall ownership company Rockstep Capital would buy Kandi from Jay Herzog, initially not doing much and keeping the Kandi name. However, things would only get worse for the struggling Kandi Mall, as its remaining anchors, the mall's bread and butter, were soon on the fritz. There's a store right there. Small one. It's like, oh, they even got a Herberger seal here. Wow, look at that. Integrity, service, quality, and style. Herberger's would be the next. As a part of the Bon-Ton Store's bankruptcy, they would shutter all of their Minnesota locations, including Kandi's, in 2018, leaving another black hole on the directory, which would suck in tenants around it, as you saw with the walled-off trade home. AMC, whom had been operating the 6th screen for several years, would sell it to Realux in 2018, whom would remodel the theaters into what you see today. So I guess that was the one good positive change. However, it was short-lived, as Sears Hometown would close their struggling store on January 12, 2019. In February of 2019, Kohl's would end up buying half of the old Kmart, with the other half becoming a Harbor Freight. However, despite Kohl's having a mall entrance, they chose to leave it closed. In July of 2020, Rockstep would officially rebrand and rename the mall to Uptown Willmar, dropping the Kandi Mall name entirely. It seems a new name was nowhere near enough though, as that summer, JCPenney, the mall's final real connected anchor store, would, as a part of their bankruptcy, close in August of 2020. And over the last 5 years, the mall has basically just remained the same, stagnating even further. While a hot tub store and an indoor golf is open in some of the old spaces, a major loss just recently with Jo-Ann Fabrics in 2025 has surely hurt them all. GameStop is also closed, and with Bath & Body Works and Claire's leaving several small-town malls, I wouldn't be surprised if they were the next. The old JCPenney space has been in the talks of becoming a new Wilmar City Hall. However, that project has stalled over the last 5 years, so I have doubt that they will ever move on it. Instead, the space has been used for a Spear Halloween the last 5 years. Uptown Willmar, as I'm recording this in summer of 2025, is still kicking though, with some fantastic stores and eateries, so if you're ever out this way in the west central Minnesota region, I highly suggest checking out Kandi Mall, or Uptown Willmar. I do have to give some credit to my friend Yodeling Loon, who some of you might know for his Minnesota Dead Mall videos. If it hadn't been for his first video on this place, way back in 2020, I wouldn't have even known it existed. There's a whole lot of hidden gems out in this great state, so if you guys want more amazing obscure hidden Minnesota malls, check out his channel. Anyways, as I do a little walk through this mall's amazing main entrance, still rocking the JCPenney nameplate for some reason, we'll head out, see a bit of the front side, and a super awesome old Kmart label scar. Like I said, if any of you are ever out here, give this place a visit. Now I want to thank those of you that have stuck around for watching all the way through. If you enjoyed tonight's video, consider liking and subscribing so that you don't miss out on future Dead Mall adventures. As next Saturday we'll be back once again, this time in a teeny little dead mall in northern Minnesota, which features identical naming to Uptown Willmar. Be the first one to correctly guess it, and I'll shout you out in the next episode. But until I see you all then, have yourselves a lovely evening, and peace out guys. See you later.